Welcome everyone. This is the Alström Syndrome All About Research webinar. We've got Professor Tim Barrett here and we've got Bernd here as well over from Germany. And they're both going to be telling us a bit about research developments and really thinking about how we can bring the Alström community together. So we love connecting and collaborating together across the globe. So welcome to everyone that's joined us today. And there's a slide that's come up here which is all about welcoming you in all the different languages. We've actually got, last time I looked, which was probably about an hour ago, we had about 20 different countries that was registered this evening, which is fantastic. So have no idea what all the languages are on the screen, but hopefully some of those will be here this evening. So thank you for all registering. And also we've got the little chat box there. So if you want to pop in where you're from, and maybe as well you could pop in what brings you to the webinar this evening, whether you're diagnosed with Alström or whether you have a personal connection or a professional connection, then you could pop that in there as well for us. Now the webinar tonight will be from 6:30 to around about 8 o'clock, and that's UK time. Now, so that the webinar can be as accessible as possible, you've all arrived muted and with your cameras off for the minute. Now, as the webinar goes on, you will have chance to ask some questions a bit later, and we will be able to go through and unmute you and be able to hopefully turn the cameras off as well, so that you can ask some of your questions in person, which will be lovely. You can also post your questions or your comments in the Q&A section as we go through. And also, if you need any technology support, please raise your hand, which is in the webinar controls, and we'll be able to message you so that we can help you with anything there. With the questions, we're hoping to be able to answer all your questions, but if we haven't got time today or they're quite complex, we'll get back to you after the event. The session today is being recorded, and we will share the recording afterwards. It's all in English today, but we're hoping from the recording we can transcribe that afterwards for you all, so that it will be so that lots of countries can all see what we're doing and the developments going on globally. So a few introductions for you. So I'm Catherine Lewis and I'm ASUK Operations Manager at Alström Syndrome UK. I've worked for the charity now for about 15 years. Similar time to Kerry Leeson Beavers, who also is online today. She's a mum to a young adult with Alström Syndrome, and she's also the Chief Executive of Alström Syndrome UK, and she's been similar time to me, really, sort of 15 to 20 years with the charity. We've also got Bernd here, who is from Germany, and he's the founder of Alström Initiative over in Germany, and also a dad to a young boy with Alström Syndrome. And we've also got Professor Tim Barrett, who's going to be going through all the research developments with us. He is our clinical and research expert here in the UK. So a really warm welcome to the global webinar to you all. So not only is it a lovely research global webinar for you, but we always try and get together around this time of year, whether it's in person or as a webinar as it is these days, really to celebrate World Alström Day. And that is because Carl Henry Alström was born on the 3rd of May 1907, and Carl Henry Alström actually founded the condition many moons ago, and he was a Swedish psychiatrist and a scientist, and he realised, he actually, you know, was a bit of a detective in a way, I suppose we'd say now, in actually joining some of those puzzle pieces together and the symptoms together to be able to look at Alström as a syndrome in its own right as we know it today. So now I'm going to hand over to Professor Tim Barrett, who is going to talk through some of the research developments that are going on across Europe in the minute, and then we'll be going to some questions from him, and then we'll be handing over to Bernd, who will be doing some updates and talking a bit about the importance of research in his country. So So Tim, have you got some slides that you would like to share with us? And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Lovely, thank you, Catherine. I'll just check I can make this work.
There we go.
Right, can you see my slides?
Yeah, that's perfect, Tim.
Lovely, okay. Well, in that case, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Catherine, and thank you, Kerry, for inviting me to give this talk. It's quite scary because I'm following in the footsteps of Pietro Maffei from last year and Richard Paisley from the year before, who've covered a lot of the things here. So what I was going to try and do is cover some slightly different things for this talk and hopefully make it interesting and accessible. Everything I say, I'm going to describe the slides, so you don't need to look at the slides to follow my talk as I'm going. So I'm going to start with an introduction to rare diseases, where I came in on the Alström journey, which is a lot shorter than many people on this call. So I really came in at about the year 2000. And I'm going to divide it into three parts. I'm going to talk over the last 25 years and what have been the improvements in diagnosis over that time, and how the diagnostic odyssey has got a little easier and testing has become easier. Some of the improvements in management with the development of multidisciplinary clinics and some of the outcomes from those clinics, and some of the prospects for treatments and some of the first clinical trials for treatments that have been delivered for Alström, and some of the prospects perhaps for some gene therapies, hopefully, in the next few years. And I'm based at Birmingham Women's and Children's Hospital in Birmingham in the UK. I've been working there since about 1991, and we're very fortunate to have a new building where we can see children with rare diseases. And I'm a children's doctor rather than an adult doctor. And then on the research side, I'm based in the medical school in University of Birmingham, where I've got a small research team that looks particularly at the genetics of rare forms of diabetes and developing some clinical trials work as well. So my starting point of an interest in Alström began with being interested in rare diseases and rare conditions. And I was particularly interested in rare forms of diabetes, as I'm a children's diabetes doctor. And when we think about rare diseases, at least in Europe, we think of any rare disease as something that affects less than 1 in 2,000 people, down to less than 1 in a million, or even less than that. One that everybody's heard of as cystic fibrosis, or chronic lung disease in children caused by a faulty gene that affects about 1 in 2,000, all the way down to Alström and even rarer, and Alström probably affects about 1 in a million people. There's about 8,000 rare diseases altogether, ranging anything from 1 in 2,000 people to less than 1 in a million. So they're all individually rare, but when you put them together collectively, about 6 people out of every 100 is affected by one of those 8,000 rare diseases. And 6 people out of 100 is a lot of people, and a lot of illness, morbidity, and also cost, of course, to health services. So there's a real need for governments to spend money on trying to find treatments for rare diseases to relieve the burden of these. And I started, interestingly, by meeting Kay Parkinson and her family. And the reason for that was that I'd written a review article about different rare types of diabetes, and I covered 15 different types. And one of those types, I'd written an article, and it only had about 7 lines, but I mentioned Alström syndrome, because Alström syndrome can be related to diabetes. And Kay Parkinson, being the amazing lady that she is, came across my article, saw that I was a children's doctor, and effectively collared me and arm twisted me to get involved in Alström, and that was in about the year 2000. And of course, she's a very strong and powerful lady, and I've been involved in Alström ever since. Many of you will know Kay and her husband John and their 2 children, Charlotte and Matthew, and I was very privileged to meet them at one of Richard Paisley's multidisciplinary clinics in Bury, in Bury Hotel in 2000. And Charlotte, or at least Kay, explained to me that Charlotte wasn't really, well, Matthew wasn't diagnosed till he was about 18 years of age, and Charlotte, consequently, wasn't diagnosed till she was about 16. So they had a 15 to 18 year delay in getting a diagnosis. And when I looked up the evidence for this, it's called a diagnostic odyssey, but it's incredibly common. And this there was a very good paper that describing this, or review, in 2016, explaining that on average, people with a rare disease get seen by 7 doctors before they get a diagnosis. 40%, or 2/5 of them, are misdiagnosed. They're given the wrong diagnosis, and the time from developing symptoms to actually getting the right diagnosis can be 5 years, or in Charlotte and Matthew's case, even longer. And this, of course, causes a massive burden on families, massive stress, massive financial burden, and a massive impact on the quality of life of all the family members, as well as those people who are affected. And of course, the time that takes to get the diagnosis, diseases can progress, treatment isn't started, and then missed opportunities to do so. So I met Charlotte and Matthew in the Berryhead Hotel in about 2000, and I'll always remember it because there was a group of us doctors sitting around the table having an evening meal, and Charlotte had got severe vision loss by that stage. So she went round, we introduced ourselves, she went round behind each of our chairs and felt the backs of our heads. And I remember her going around and seeing my friend Mark Walker, who's got a full head of hair, and she said, "Oh, I rather like this chap. He's got a very nice head of hair." Sadly, she came to me and says, "Ugh, I don't like this. There's not much hair there at all." So she sort of made herself known, and we all made friends with her and the fantastic family at that time. When the gene was described in 2002, because I worked in a genetics laboratory, I was able to, first of all, develop a genetic testing system on the National Health Service, so that all the families who'd been going to the Berryhead Hotel, who'd got clinical symptoms of Alström, but hadn't got a genetic diagnosis, we could get those arranged through the National Health Service very quickly. And of the first 12 families, we managed to identify mutations in the ALMS1 gene in all of those families. And the gene is made up of about 16 coding regions, or exons. And we found that the mutations that we found were spread throughout many of those, but particularly coding region 8 and coding region 16. Very interestingly, 5 of the 12 families had exactly the same change, or mutation change, in one particular coding region. And many of them had got a distant relation to or connection with the northeast of England and Yorkshire. So suggesting that at least in the UK, there may be evidence of a founder mutation many generations back that had been passed along the generations, and then inherited by quite a few of the different families in the UK. But we could get a testing service, and that was I think a real help for families at that time, to be able to confirm a genetic diagnosis, not just a clinical diagnosis. And then we moved on from there to think, it's a rare disease. It's very hard to get funding to do research into rare diseases. So what can we do to increase the chances of getting research funding? So working with colleagues in Exeter and others, we thought, well, there's lots of research money going into common diabetes, such as type 2 diabetes. So can we see if there's a connection between the diabetes in Alström and the diabetes in type 2 diabetes? And if we could show there was a connection, it would be much easier to get funding for this. So working with colleagues in Exeter, we found 30 people who consented to have a blood sample who'd all got common type 2 diabetes. And we sequenced their Alström genes, which of course they didn't have Alström syndrome, but we sequenced their genes looking for common changes that might be related to their diabetes. And we did find some gene variants. And then we took those gene variants and looked for them in another 2,000 people with type 2 diabetes, and another 2,000 people who don't have diabetes, and 500 families with diabetes. And what we were trying to do is to see whether any of the common variants in the Alström gene could explain why these people had common diabetes. We found 18 common variants in the Alström gene, but interestingly, there was no difference between people with type 2 diabetes or people without type 2 diabetes. So we couldn't say that changes in the Alström gene were causing their diabetes. And similarly, those variants were not transmitted preferentially to people with diabetes in the family studies. So it's a good thing, really, I guess, but it doesn't look like changes in the Alström gene contribute to common diabetes. So that line of applying for research funding sort of dried up, and we had to look at other fundings as well. So the next thing we did was went to the European Union and applied to their FP7 health program at the time, that it was called, and got some money to support a registry, a Europe-wide registry at that stage. And it was trying to bring together several rare diseases that all develop diabetes, to try and understand the natural history of these, and to try and help inform how best to manage these, and to try and develop a genetic testing network of different laboratories across Europe who would be able to do that. So we got the European Union funding in about 2010, and we were able to pull together about 450 patient records and people who took part, including about 170 people with Alström at that stage. The first thing we were able to do with the UK patients was study those in a bit more detail. And we were able to look at about 30 UK people with Alström and measure their total body fat mass and measure their insulin sensitivity to see if we could understand the diabetes better. And what we found was that, yes, of course, there was a lot of body fat mass related to the condition, but as people went from childhood to adulthood, that fat mass actually got less, or people seem to carry less body fat in adulthood than they did in childhood. But interestingly and worryingly, the insulin resistance got worse over time. So the insulin resistant diabetes needed more treatment and more drugs over time. So there was something going on beyond the fat mass that was causing this diabetes. And related to that, following up over 60 people with Alström syndrome in the EuroWAB registry from different countries, we were able to see the different ages of onset of conditions, so that the eye diseases we knew would start in infancy, hearing involvement, an average age of about 6 years, heart involvement either in the first 3 months or in early adulthood, and not in everybody, in less than half. And diabetes at that stage was in about 40% of people had diabetes. One thing that was picked up was the amount of liver involvement in almost half of children that we hadn't really appreciated from the literature so much beforehand. That was helpful because it then went to advise who would get genetic testing in the future. And that brings me on to, oh yes, the other output of this was looking for the mistakes in the Alström gene in a big cohort of people with Alström, building on the work that Jan Marshall had published in Human Mutation in the early 2000s, and extending that in 2016 to find lots and lots of different mutations. So this is an unusual genetic condition in that there are lots and lots of mutations all over the gene. There's no clear hotspot. And apart from that possible founding mutation in the UK, it wasn't obvious that there were common mutations in other parts of the population. So to design a genetic test, you almost had to sequence the whole gene at that point. That leads me then on to a really important initiative, at least for the UK, that was developed. And this was something called the 100,000 Genomes Project. And it was set off by Prime Minister David Cameron in about 2013, who recognised the importance of genetic diagnoses for rare diseases and cancer, and got government funding in to sequence the genes of 100,000 people in the UK. Half of those had rare diseases that hadn't yet got a diagnosis, and half of them had cancer. And of the 50,000 with rare diseases, they sequenced the children or the adults plus both their parents. They're called trios. And they were looking for differences in the gene sequence in the children with the disease compared to their mums and dads. And through that mechanism, they could see if they could find what the gene was or what the disease was that they got. They did fantastically, getting trillions and trillions of bits of data from this, establishing a network of genetic medicine centres around the country, and 100 hospitals in the UK who all took part and helped recruit people. And I was one of about 5,000 staff across the National Health Service who was involved in recruiting and seeing people with this. and it supported about 3,000 trainees. So just to give an example of what this has done, the first publication from this was published about 3 years ago, and of the first 2,000 children and young people with rare diseases that hadn't yet been diagnosed, they were able to find a diagnosis in over a quarter of them that wouldn't have had a diagnosis otherwise. Absolutely fantastic. And it was done automated through big gene sequencing machines in Cambridge. Some of these gene abnormalities required additional research. They've discovered 3 new disease genes and 19 new disease gene associations. And many of these diagnoses had immediate things that would change the management of the patients. So a really exciting and indeed a groundbreaking study that supported this. One of the important things for Alström, because the Alström gene, of course, had already been identified, however, was that they used this genetic information to develop what are called gene diagnostic panels. So these are panels of genes that are known to be associated with different disorders. Whereas if you see somebody in the clinic with a particular condition, whether it's diabetes, vision problems, or hearing problems, you say, right, I'm going to take a blood sample, I'm going to put it through this genetic panel with all the genes known to be associated with diabetes or deafness or vision problems, and we'll see if we can come up and find the diagnosis. This was so important for Alström because for many years, children had been presenting with cardiomyopathy, sometimes not surviving, and yet they were not being tested for Alström syndrome. So because of this 100,000 Genomes project, we were able to get that changed at the moment. So now we've got gene panels set up on the National Health Service, and I've made a list of all the ones where the Alström gene is included, so that, and these include severe early onset obesity, diabetes, insulin resistance, developmental disorders, hearing loss, eye disorders, cardiomyopathy in infancy, most importantly, and any acutely unwell child or severe pediatric disorders. So this means if anybody presents with these different conditions, they can have a genetic test done that will include the Alström gene on that gene panel. And we're seeing the effects in the clinic of people being diagnosed younger, and also people being diagnosed before all the symptoms of Alström would appear. So I think it's really revolutionized the diagnosis of Alström syndrome, and hopefully means that they're less likely to be missing people who've got genetic changes in this gene. So that's the first part I wanted to talk about. The second of the 3 parts I wanted to talk about was changes or improvements in the management of the condition after diagnosis we've got. And to do that, I'm really going to talk again about K Parkinson's Initiative, working with the UK National Health Service to set up highly specialised clinics. Now, these are funded by the UK taxpayer in the money that goes to the National Health Service. And what happens is that the National Health Service budget is top sliced from all the other services, and that top slicing funds about 90 nationally commissioned highly specialised services. And through Kay's foresight in 2008, and Kerry was working with them at that stage as well, and others were too, managed to get funding for a partnership service, a service for children, a service for adults, and importantly, funding for the Alström Syndrome UK charity. So 3 equal partners working in concert to deliver highly specialised care for people with Alström. And the ethos of the service was that for patients and their families or carers with this rare disease, that they do need coordinated care, ideally in one place, by health professionals who've got some experience of the condition, and that addresses their medical, psychological, and social or educational needs in living with a complex, disabling and life-limiting condition. We started out on the children's service with 4 face-to-face children's clinics a year, a transition clinic working with our adult colleagues, an outreach clinic in Leeds, because there was a cluster of Alström families in Leeds. And since COVID, we've added 2 telemedicine clinics or video clinics to this as well. And we were trying to respond to patient need and save them having to have lots of different separate appointments. So the way that this works is that families will come to Birmingham once a year. They'll stay overnight or come up the night before, but at the same visit, they'll see the genetics doctor, the dietitian, the physiotherapist, the heart doctor for their echocardiogram, the diabetes and the endocrine doctors, psychologists for counselling, a clinical nurse specialist who's developing an expertise in Alström, and the Alström Syndrome UK family support worker. And this is really an important role that's developed, especially over the last 4 or 5 years as well. All these clinicians come together in different outpatient rooms next door to each other in Waterfall House. We have a pre-clinic meeting often, and we have a notes meeting in the middle of the clinic. And importantly, all the clinicians therefore have to talk to each other, and we share our understanding about the conditions, and we also check that what we're advising isn't going to conflict with someone else's. So for instance, if I want to advise a new diabetes medication, I can check with the heart doctor it's not going to affect the heart monitoring. If I want a blood pressure medication, I can check with the kidney doctor it's not going to affect the kidney care, for instance. So these have been great. The main specialties that have come together wanting to do this include the heart doctors, the genetic doctors, endocrine diabetes, physiotherapy, dietetics, psychology. And then in the last 5 years, we've included liver specialists, hepatologists, after recognizing that fatty liver is a big issue. And then given enough notice, we can have individualized appointments such as ear, nose and throat, skin, respiratory or audiology. The purpose of the clinics is to try and screen for and identify any complications. We will then put together a multidisciplinary clinic team letter of recommendations to the local teams to help develop an individual care plan, and then support as a centre of expertise for the local primary care team, local secondary care, and also advocate on behalf of the children for their educational needs and their social needs. And that interaction with ASUK key workers is absolutely critical for that, to be able to do that. The annual review investigations we tend to do now include a baseline liver ultrasound scan and a fibro scan, a hearing test, and electrophysiology for the eyes. Annually, we'll monitor growth and body mass index, monitor kidney function, liver function, livers and lipids, and urine and vision. And then every 5 years or so, we'll check a repeat liver ultrasound, a repeat hearing test, and of course pubertal assessments as well. And the specialist nurse and the ASUK family liaison officer really help with getting patients to clinic, making sure that they've got accommodation the night before, supporting them with their travel requirements, support for the educational healthcare plan, and then ongoing from that, transition care and college and employment placement. And these annual review investigations, we've incorporated them into a consensus clinical management guidelines that was led by my colleague Tarek Highwatt, who leads the adult service, and Natasha Tahani, who very kindly wrote the manuscript for the guidelines, and they're now available open access online. So for the outcomes of the service, I looked back at the first 5 children who we saw going back to even before the clinics were started in 2005, 2006, and looked at them for the first 5 years. They'd all been seen over 5 years attending the service and looking at their obesity levels and their body mass index over that time. And the age range was from 5 years up to about 13 years. And the body mass index, they're all obese at the start. And as we would say in scientific terms, 2.5 to 3.5 standard deviations above the mean, the average mean for people who don't have Alström. But after the 5 years, those had dropped. They'd all come down, and they'd, on the whole, lost half a standard deviation easily from those. And this seemed to be very much the effect of having the clinics and the dietetic advice all in one place to support these children. So that obesity did seem to be stabilizing because of this service was there. The other outcomes I've just included on here, comparing 2008 to 2024. So 2008 was the year the service was formally set up and funded. We then had a caseload of 30 children. The caseload last year went up to about 43 children. And this is really because better diagnosis. So children are being diagnosed before they develop the full house of symptoms. So we're seeing children perhaps earlier than we would have done when Matthew and Charlotte Parkinson were diagnosed. The average age at being diagnosed was about 11 years in 2008, but last year it's dropped down to less than 5. And this again is because of that better diagnosis. So we can now see children earlier and intervene earlier to screen for complications, and hopefully when better treatments are available to offer those earlier as well. So I think that's really helped. The proportion with diabetes, I started this service as a diabetes doctor, expecting to be looking after lots of children with diabetes. It was about half the children we saw in 2008 had diabetes, insulin resistant. In 2024, it's less than 5%. It's really dropped down. And I think this is related to better coordination of care and better consistency of advice, and really parents and families working really hard on lifestyle and the dietary advice that's given as well. So that's the parental understanding is a really important part of this. And the average body mass index in 2008 for children was 35 kilograms per square meters. In 2024 is 24 kilograms per square meters. And this is before the advent of obesity drugs, anti-obesity drugs. So this is just lifestyle, diet, exercise, and general care and management with families. So I'm really pleased. Is it cost effective, and are patients happy? So we published a paper from some students from the London School of Economics in 2015, surveying just over 20 UK Alström patients, children and adults, about what they thought about the clinics and what the clinic costs were. And children and adults were reporting that they felt the care on the whole was well organised. They liked it being personalised. They liked it being whole person, and they liked very much to have a say in their own care. So there's a very high level of patient satisfaction. The treatment compliance has been really, really fantastic, and that's in massive credit to the ASUK family support workers, who've managed to get that did not attend rate down to almost 0. So it's been absolutely, we're really grateful for their help with this. And the clinic cost per patient was estimated before the service was about £1,000 per patient per year. But the cost of the service was down to about £700 per patient per year. So pretty much a 30% reduction by coordinating care like this. So it was cost effective for the National Health Service. And these clinics are now trying to use them as a model to support multidisciplinary clinic services for other rare diseases across the health service as well. And part of the reason that it's cheaper is because if you get all the clinical appointments together in one place, it needs fewer clinic visits, children need less time off school, parents have less disruption to their work, less need to travel, and there's also less doubling up of investigations. There's a bit less duplication of investigation requests that would be done with multiple visits. So I think it's really helped overall to do that. The third part of my presentation and my talk in the last part here is thinking about the prospects for treatments and what's available going forward. And I think this is so important, and it's another area where I've seen so many differences over the last 25 years. And effectively, because I've seen that now the industry and pharmacy industry is now interested in Alström, and this is great. So for the first of these studies relates to a drug company called Rhythm Pharmaceuticals. And they've developed a specialist drug that works on the hunger pathway in the brain. And their particular interest was for genetic conditions that cause obesity in infancy due to excessive hunger. They found a drug that can block that hunger pathway at the level of the brain and make people feel fuller and not wanting to eat so much. And the theory was that, can this drug reduce the degree of obesity in people with infancy onset obesity disorders? And they chose 2 they wanted to study. Bardet-Biedl syndrome, which is a commoner condition than Alström, and Alström syndrome. In Bardet-Biedl syndrome is infancy onset obesity, but there's a lot of kidney involvement. There can sometimes be limb abnormalities as well, and children lose their vision usually in their teens. And in Alström, as you of course know, vision impairment comes much earlier in that condition. They published a very important paper looking at about 38 adults with Bardet-Biedl syndrome and 6 adults with Alström syndrome. And they gave them this drug called setmelanotide as a daily injection for up to a year on this treatment. The drug seemed to be very effective in people with Bardet-Biedl syndrome in that they would lose weight and their body mass index standard deviation fell by over 10%. Unfortunately, of the 6 patients with Alström that were enrolled, on average, they did not meet that criteria. They did not lose over 10% of the body weight lost. So although in 1 or 2 cases there was very impressive weight loss, it wasn't enough people with Alström to justify developing a license to give this drug. So therefore, we're now looking at other alternatives for people to have it. But from my point of view, I thought it was really important that this drug company was interested in trying to find new treatments for Alström syndrome. As you know, newer weight loss drugs or anti-obesity drugs called GLP-1 receptor agonists have become available. And these have been used in clinic now with great success. Richard Paisley started them off in the Torbay clinic, and I know my colleague Dr. Tarek Highwatt is using them in the adult service, and we're beginning in the children's service as well. So they may be helping with weight reduction in these. The second one I wanted to mention was a drug company called Promatic, and now called Lumina Pharmaceuticals, I think, who developed a novel compound that seemed to treat the fibrosis in diseases that cause fibrosis. It also seemed to be anti-inflammatory, and it seemed to show promise in a rare condition called pulmonary fibrosis. And because they know that in Alström syndrome you can also get fibrosis, they thought, why don't we try and see if this drug will work in Alström? So this study was delivered in a single centre in adults in Birmingham, looked after by my colleague Tarek Highwatt. The plan was to recruit 18 people with Alström. It was a medicine that you could give by mouth, which is much better than an injection. And the plan was to continue it for almost a year. They were collecting information on safety, effectiveness on liver function, insulin resistance, and heart function and fat tissue. They followed these patients up for quite some time, and thankfully it did appear to be safe. But sadly, it was stopped early because it wasn't shown to be effective enough to work. There were some signs of effect on the liver function, but there wasn't enough effect to be able to get it licensed for use in the clinic. So sadly, that study had stopped. But I have hope, because it's another drug company that's interested in trying to find their drugs and trying to do clinical trials in Alström. And this is something that's been new over the last 10 years that's really held. So what other treatments might be useful in future? There are new technologies being developed at the moment, and there's a whole lot of money going into what are called nucleic acid therapies. So these are therapies that can correct genetic changes in genes. One of them is called antisense oligonucleotides, which are short bits of RNA or DNA, RNA, messenger RNA, that can actually correct genetic abnormalities if they're not working properly. And the best example where this has been used is in a muscle dystrophy called Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. These can target bits of the gene that are missing and join them up to create not completely normal bits of gene, but genes that work well enough to improve muscle function. I haven't seen studies of this yet in Alström, and part of the issue is Alström affects all parts of the body, whereas in Duchenne it just affected the muscle. And there are bits of the body that's very hard to reach to use this treatment for. On a related note is messenger RNA therapy. So it's a form of this, really. And we all know about messenger RNA therapy because some of the COVID vaccines have been made with messenger RNA therapy that have been used. So they're very effective for that. Messenger RNA therapy can also be used to put back in to the body genes that don't work or not so good. So they're very good for conditions that need an enzyme being replaced, and they can be given as an injection under the skin. The best uses at the moment are to replace an enzyme that's not working, to try and regenerate some tissue, and potentially to do some gene editing as well. So mRNA therapy is a potential route whereby we might look at treatments for Alström in the future. Gene replacement therapy, I think, is the closest one that I think is going to be important. And I think we were all heartened by the progress made in another rare eye disease called Leber's hereditary amaurosis. So this is a rare genetic condition that causes blindness due to a faulty gene in the back of the eye, in the retina. The gene doesn't work and is not made properly. So what happens is that they make the gene in the lab and they put it into a carrier vector, what's called a vector, that's a bit of a viral coat that's used as a carrier. Adenovirus associated vector. And then it's injected through the eyeball into the back of the eye, into the layer where the gene is missing. A really important study was published in this a few years back now, showing that in children where this was injected, there was an improvement in their vision and a big improvement in their night vision. And there was even some partial recovery of the bits of the retina that had stopped working, that were previously undetectable, which of course is a great hope for people with Alström as well. This is relatively good, and it's now been licensed for use on the National Health Service for about the last 3 or 4 years. The thing about gene replacement therapy, though, is that you can only do it once, because your body will make antibodies to the carrier protein on it, and that could engender a reaction later, if that was the case. So you have to get it right the first time. And the other problem with Alström is the Alström gene is much, much bigger than the gene in Leber's hereditary amaurosis. So it doesn't fit into the same vector, the AAV vector. We're going to need a different vector, something called a lentivirus vector that can take much bigger gene packages. So it needs a whole new area of research to try and develop it, to take that forward. Related to that is gene editing. So if you can't replace the gene, can you edit it and change it? And these are very interesting techniques that have just developed in the last 5 years or so, called CRISPR-Cas9. And what they are is effectively, you can put in drugs or chemicals which can work their way to the nucleus, they can get into cells, into the nucleus, and they can get to the DNA. They can cut the DNA at the place where the faulty gene is, and they can repair it, and then they can join it back up again. So this gene editing has been really good for sickle cell disease, so a blood disorder, and beta cell thalassemia as well. It's good in cells that do lots of cell divisions, but it's not very good if it's cells that don't divide. So for the heart cells don't tend to divide. So the gene editing may not be helpful for heart complication in Alström syndrome, so it may not work so well. However, saying that, I did want just to flag up something that Pietro Maffei mentioned at last year's meeting. And I mention it because one of the researchers, Elizabeth Forsyth, is a genetics doctor based in London, who works primarily on Barrett beetle. But in this particular publication, she also worked on Alström. And what she was doing was she was looking at skin samples from patients with Alström and patients with Barrett beetle. She was growing those in the cell. She was finding the genetic abnormality in the Alström gene, and she was treating these cells with these gene editing or read-through drugs. And she could correct the genetic defect in the Alström gene in the Alström skin cells. Now, this is really important for us because we want researchers to think about Alström and gene editing and gene corrections in that. And Elizabeth Forsyth is one of ours who's going to be delivering a gene therapy study in Barrett beetle starting later this year, but is also potentially interested in developing gene therapy studies for Alström. So she's somebody that we really want to stay in good contact with about this. Just coming to the end of my presentation here, I wanted to mention we've received funding from the medical charity LifeArc to develop a translational research centre for rare diseases, and it's a joint venture with Birmingham, Newcastle and Belfast. Effectively, what it's trying to do is to try and design better clinical trials that need fewer patients, that are less likely to need a dummy medicine arm, and that will deliver results quicker by setting up sites closer to patients' homes, and hopefully setting up sites in all 4 nations of the United Kingdom to do this. And Kerry very kindly is involved, very intimately involved in this as part of our patient advisory groups, and we're hoping to include cohorts of patients with Alström's into this if we can get clinical trials going that way. So in summary, and I hope I haven't overrun time too much, in my journey with Alström, since the discovery of the Alström gene in 2002, I've seen faster diagnosis and a reduction in that awful diagnostic odyssey. Better models of clinical care with these one-stop multidisciplinary team clinics, massive improvements in clinical management, so that I'm almost out of a job from the diabetes point of view in the clinics. Finally, pharmacy industry interest in developing treatment trials in Alström, and I'm sure we will see more of those in the next 5 years. And then the start of gene therapy trials for inherited eye disease that actually are successful and getting into the clinic. So I really have great hopes that we will see this in the not too distant future for Alström as well. And it just leaves me to thank all of the Children's Alström Service team that I've listed on here, now led by my colleague, Dr. Melanie Kershaw, and really important people in there, Kirsty Mobley, our dietitian, Katerina Leal, our geneticist at the Hannah Titheridge, and before her, Denise Williams, Ashish Chickamani, our cardiologist, and all the other members of the team who support this, not least our commissioners as well, who've been fantastic, and ASUK, whom it's fantastic to work with, Claire and Sarah and others. Thank you. I'll stop at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was absolutely fantastic. And as you say, it was fantastic to really see that progression and really reflect on that, because I think sometimes we're so busy with everything going on, it sometimes is wonderful just to reflect on the amount of work that's gone on and the progress that's been made. I mean, we see it day to day just as much as you do, that we're seeing people being diagnosed much younger and babies being diagnosed, whereas previously it always used to be people a lot older. And also, you know, the research and developments that are going on and the enthusiasm for rare diseases and Alström syndrome is just fantastic to hear about as well. So thank you very much. Is there any questions or anything there that's come through for Tim or anyone that would like to ask anything specific before we move on to Bernd?
I can't see any questions in the chat. Please do add. We can get Tim to answer them at the end as well. So if you think of anything else afterwards, please do add them. But Tim, I just wanted to mention, I think, you know, as a parent, speaking as a parent now, I think it is really frustrating. You know, it's so positive to see where we're coming, and I think, you know, for families that are coming along behind us, I think, you know, that you know, the getting a better diagnosis, a faster diagnosis, I think is great, and seeing some of the, you know, the improvements in terms of management and better health outcomes, I think is really encouraging. And I think sometimes as a parent, it can be really disheartening when you see that there's research out there that's, you know, especially in sight loss research, you know, sometimes parents will see developments in Leber's amaurosis and straight away will think, well, surely this could benefit my child as well. So I think I always feel it's really, you know, we do a lot of work in thinking we do need to manage expectations. But I think what I found really helpful there is that you gave that explanation as to why some things are really helpful in other conditions, but they might not work in Alström. But what's really important to remember as well, even though those specific therapies and treatments might not work in Alström, the learning from them hopefully will take us that step further to develop something for us, you know, next. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And I should have mentioned actually the fantastic initiative by Gabby De Silva and others here to hold an Alström research workshop in Birmingham in June. And I think we're inviting some of the people. I'll make sure that Elizabeth Forsyth gets invited as well to make them. I think we must make a note of that, to make them aware of the opportunities here and the clinical need. And if we can get people like Elizabeth interested in it, then it'll speed up the gene therapy studies much quicker.
And we do work quite closely with Elizabeth through the Ciliopathy Alliance, and also the two of the people that were named on that paper with Elizabeth, Helena May Samara and Maria Massaggi, are coming along to that sight loss workshop, because one of the things we wanted from that is to learn from some of the other ciliopathies, some of the other gene therapies in other conditions. If we could bring everybody together in a room, whether they can be there in person or virtually, to think about, okay, so what do we need to, what can we learn from what others are doing, and what do we need to do next to progress things in Alström syndrome. And also, while we've got you, Tim, so with the Life Arc, obviously we've got the PhD student as well. We're part of that, so we were interviewing for the PhD student yesterday. So I just wondered if you're happy to give a bit of a quick update on what that is.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't want to overrun too much, but the Life Arc money also is funding basic researchers to do that initial work to try and find potential targets to treat in Alström syndrome as well here. So if they can do that basic work and find a target, then colleagues like myself and others can actually put an application for a clinical trial to test it and see whether it works as a treatment. But we can't do it without that basic studies being done first. And therefore, to get the money for a PhD student who can work on Alström for 3 years full time is such a benefit. It's really going to help us, and hopefully it will just give some hope to families that people are working out there. They are really trying to find new treatments for this condition.
And a big thanks for you, Tim. You've always been a real strong advocate for Alström, and we really appreciate all your efforts. And just to say that I know sometimes as well it can be confusing, because obviously can be frustrating because the clinics obviously are in the UK, but just to add that there are clinics in the US as well, and so to contact ASI if you're interested in attending one of the clinics in the US. We have been able to sort out some agreements to access the clinics in the UK, but also when Tim talks about the clinical management, we have got the clinical guidelines that European clinicians have put together with ASUK and other patient organisations in Europe as well, that everybody can share with their clinicians in any country, that gives some guidance around how to manage conditions. So we will, there's lots of resources on our website, and we'll share those links with everyone afterwards. I'll be quiet now and I'll hand back to
Fabulous. No, thank you, Kerry. There is a few questions which have actually just come in. So Sean, there's one from you. So I've heard before that the different exons may point to certain conditions that the patient experiences. Are there any correlations that have been identified?
So the answer is not strong enough. Okay. It would be very nice to say, oh, you've got this mutation, therefore you're not going to get kidney disease or something like that. Unfortunately, there are no clear correlations between the mistake in the gene and what the symptoms are going to be. So despite quite large numbers, it's not really strong enough to be able to use as a predictor, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And the next one is really sort of thinking through sort of the technology and speciality of glasses, really. So John Chan is asking, what is the possibility of vision improvements through the use of speciality glasses such as the Apple Vision Pro? Any research from that side of things?
I haven't looked up the research on that at the moment, but I've know that there are families who are using these at the moment that are a reasonable substitute. I think the technology is getting better and better as a vision aid. I'm not sure that it's going to improve the vision per se, but more to be used as an aid. I'd be very interested to know, and maybe our care workers can know what research is done, but I've not seen research on that.
Yeah, I think, as you say, I think technology is getting better. So definitely as an aid, I can see it being, improvements going forward. But whether to actually improve the vision itself, I think we'd have to have a look at it, ourselves. Fabulous, thank you. So next we have Bernd, who has come from Germany, but he's actually in Italy at the moment, just to confuse us all, and I'm sure he can tell us all a bit about that. So he's going to tell us a little bit about his sort of experiences of research and his priorities, and a little bit about what's going on for AS Initiative as well. So over to you, Bernd.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. Maybe to confuse you even more, I'm Austrian, so I'm an Austrian living in Germany.
You just throw it all in there, don't you?
but first of all, somebody wants to say hi.
Hi. Hello.
So,
lovely
hi,
to
Ben,
see
how are you?
you.
Come on.
To you.
We just got his marks for English at school. They're quite good, so challenge him.
Excellent.
I have a little bit English, but my English isn't good.
Your English is very good.
No.
It's
A
getting
lot
better.
better
Next,
than our languages, so please don't. Let's not do a vice versa thing, shall we?
We aren't very
next-
good with other languages, Ben, so you're doing better than me and Catherine.
Yes, a lot better to say the least.
and next year he's doing the presentation, okay?
Oh, I'll hold you to that.
Okay. So now he has to go to
Fabulous.
bed now.
Thank you, Bernd.
Okay, my pleasure. Well, yeah, we're just in Italy for a couple of days because we have a holiday today in Germany, which allowed us to go with the kids to Italy. Yeah, that was Ben. Ben is 13 now, so he just got a teenager. And he was diagnosed Alström at the age of, it was between 4 and 5. And it took us about 4 years to get the diagnosis. So when Tim was talking about diagnosis before, I think that was one of the kind of big areas of improvement that we could see over the last years, that things really progressed there. Because I well remember when we got the diagnosis. Actually, of course, it was because it was totally unexpected. So it was really hard to take in the first step. But actually, what was really harder to take at that point was when I tried to get knowledge about the disease, about Alström, or anybody who could give me some sort of advice. I really traveled around the world via phone in about 1 day, because there were 2-3 people that could help me and pass me on to somebody who might know something. But I really got the feeling of, okay, now you're with a challenge and you're completely on your own, because not only is there nobody who can really help you or has any knowledge, but there isn't any activity going on. And that was really even more scary and more, dissatisfying is maybe the wrong word at that point. Getting this feeling of being alone or being left alone or having a challenge with your child and you simply cannot help. And if I reflect now back to the last year and the developments, I think, and Catherine, when you asked me the question, like, can you talk a little bit about why research is so important? Basically, the most important things that came to my mind, it gives you hope, as simple as that. And it gives us as a community also a certain relevance. And even though it might sound hard, I know that whatever will come up in the next coming years, it might not help Ben. He lost his visory over the last years. He started as a kid with 10-15%. Now he's blind. Nobody can give him back the seeing. But nevertheless, knowing that there is a certain interest in our disease, that there is a kind of relevance of the disease, that people start taking care on a global scale, that's absolutely encouraging. And I think we also, as parents of kids, knowing that we might not be able to help our kids, it's also our responsibility to make sure that for future generations, for newly diagnosed, not only Alzheimer's disease, it's true for every rare disease, but that people get help, and that as soon as we can, with all our kind of global power that we have, we do whatever we can to find answers, to find help, and to support us as good as we can, and those coming as soon as we can, in order to make sure that these people, these kids, get all the help they need as early as possible. And what I really love about the developments and ASUK, Carrie, Catherine, Tim, and all the others, your role is really fantastic in our case. I can feel every year, like this pushing is getting more, the relevance is getting higher, the structures are being more and more set up. Being it, of course, in UK, you're much more mature than we are in Germany, but even in Germany now things get rolling. We started our initiative. We set out our patient organization. We now, for the first time, are able to start recruiting medical support, because for the time being, which is totally weird for me, if we're doing kind of European conversations, it's all doctors, professors, medical, highly skilled people, and me as a BA student joining for the medical part, which is a situation which is not acceptable, and where we are now working on and now starting recruiting, now building up advisory boards also in Germany, now getting a little bit more into the research direction, not by starting new things, but by trying to contribute more and more to what we are doing on a global scale. And that part, and we've heard it now from Catherine and also from Tim, that part of the collaboration, I think that's one of the key success factors for us, because we are so little or so few globally, that the only way forward and the only way to be successful is by working together, by sharing the knowledge, by trying to increase the relevance of our disease as much as we can. And the example with diabetes for me is a fantastic one, because if we show that understanding Alström, the Alström gene, what's happening there, might help to fix much bigger problems, then we are immediately where we want to be taken seriously, to be seen as a relevant disease to work with. And that's another, I mean, everybody knows that, but it's a simple fact or a rule of life, I would say, that only if something is relevant and only if for something is a certain also commercial relevance or purpose, then people will start caring about it. And I think we're on a very good way there. And that's also now something where we try to contribute more and more from Germany. For example, we are now working with the University Clinics Network and trying to find more and more Alström patients, because for the time being we have about 15-20 we know, and taking the population and taking the prevalence, it should be 80. So there's quite a huge gap. And we are now fortunate enough to get access to this university network, and we just started a study where we try to screen as many data as we can with the kind of Alström parameters and see if there's more patients we do not yet know, so we can include them in the community. We can make sure that we have more and more patients, more and more data that we then hopefully can also use in a more global context. So that's basically in a nutshell one of the things that we are working on that are very important for us to push forward. Another one is hyperphagia. That's another thing we've put on our agenda for our patient organization. We've been working with Rhythm. We're even doing some kind of pilot exercise with Ozempic and Wegovy, which works quite well to support our patients and to do something there at least, because I think the whole nutrition part is one of the few parts where we as either caregivers or people being directly affected by Alström can do something to work against all the symptoms maybe coming in the future. So that's something we've also put on our agenda. But I think really, and Tim now showed it in his presentation as well, things are progressing, and it's really worth investing into that, all these efforts, supporting as much as we can, and yeah, keep believing that we can find answers. And even like I said, with the example of this seeing of Ben or many others, it might not help us, but it will help others. And I think it's so important really to do whatever we can to use that dynamics that we now have, to use our global power to really support you guys from ASUK as much as we can in really keeping this global community not only alive, but working together and sharing as much as we can in that sense to get forward. Because every day things are getting better. Technology is progressing at a speed which was not, not even imaginable 10 years ago. So every day the chances are getting better than they were yesterday. And that in combination with where we are, with all the energy and power that we have, with the knowledge that we now have, and I think with the positive mindset that we all have, even though we have tough times, there's no doubt about it. I think that is a good outlook into the future. So really looking forward to moving on, to pushing, to supporting wherever we can, and yeah, give us hope on a daily basis. And I think that's a nice way to end my little insight into how I think and what we are doing. And thanks a lot for taking care.
No, thank you, Bernd. I really got the kind of two parts to that talk, really. The start, which was reflecting on how things started really for you, which was extremely challenging. And I think every parent that or carer that's gone through that diagnosis of feeling, completely out of control, the challenges that brings, and the fact there's even now, it's that, little information depending on what country you're in, it is that, that postcode lottery. So, reflecting on that as well as where you are now, setting up the Alström initiative and working with researchers and, developers in your own country. So it's a real journey for you as well, isn't it, and your family?
It definitely is, but it's the thing is, at some point on that journey, and basically I never really did it, but I'm to be honest, I'm privileged to have such a journey, because what I'm learning, what I'm experiencing, if I look at Ben, he's now a teenager, he's full of energy, full of hope, full of whatever, in his frame, and that's for me the important thing. It's not about can he be an Olympic champion in whatever. That's not the question. It's about understanding, and that's for every individual the same. What is his or her frame that is possible in terms of creating the best life imaginable, and helping somebody, like using that frame, filling that frame with life. I think that's for every parent, I think, one of the most exciting things to do. And if you then have a child that is special in a way that feels different than we do, and then perceives things different, and learning from that, and accepting this new perspective in a positive way, I think it's absolutely a privilege. It's a challenge, of course, but which things in life that are fulfilling are not a challenge. I mean, nothing comes for free. So if you want to have good feelings or good impressions or whatever, you have to do something for it. And and that's the great thing. So I'm really privileged to have such a son, to be part of such a community, and to simply make sure that we contribute a little bit to getting or to making things better.
Definitely. And I think the one thing you said, which really I think resounds with everybody, is that collaboration is so important. We're all so small. There's all such small numbers around the world that it really is collaborating in whatever way we can, learning from each other, and just taking that time to really, how can we help and support each other through it, really. So and that's what we try to do as much as we can. So thank you ever so much for sharing your experiences with us, and I'm sure we will catch up soon. So fantastic. So is there any questions that anybody has for Bernd? I don't think there's any that have come in just yet. Let me just have a quick.
There's just a comment from Gonzalo Trives, just saying that I'd really like to connect with you. So I've given permission for Catherine to share email addresses.
Absolutely.
So we'll do that afterwards.
Oh, fantastic.
Absolutely.
That's it.
My pleasure.
If we can connect people together, then that's absolutely fantastic. Let me just share where we got to. Great. So I'm just going to do, I'm just going to hand over to Kerry for a minute, who is just going to do a quick recap on any areas that maybe Tim may not have touched upon. Just some other areas that we've got so many research developments that are going on at the minute. Particularly, we had our conference in October last year, and since then there's been so much enthusiasm. Everyone's been getting together a lot more since sort of the COVID pandemic. We've been able to, and that there has been so many, you know, things going on. So if I hand over to Kerry, she's going to just give a quick little update on a few areas that may not have been mentioned up to now. So over to you, Kerry.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I think Tim's covered most things, so that's great. So we've got the sight loss workshop coming up on the 30th of June. Places for that are limited, but what we are going to do is share an update after that workshop, and we're going to hold another webinar to be able to share with you the findings from that. But it's important to know that that is just the start of the process. We're really going to be looking at what needs to happen next, and we've been really fortunate to be funded by Birmingham University, and they do offer some follow-on funding. So we're hoping to develop some work packages around that we'll definitely share with everybody, and hope to get a lot of people involved in that. We've mentioned the drug screening programme, and I said we did interviews for that yesterday, so hopefully the PhD student will be starting in October this year. There's a study looking at neuropathy, and we've also Charlie Softly at Keele University is doing some research working with frogs and tadpoles, and Charlie's came to our conference to share her work, and I'm hopeful that Charlie, there was an update actually in one of our last newsletters, and I'm surely Charlie will come along to a future webinar to give an update as well. So really exciting times, and I do really get that sense that we're really starting to move forward now with research, and it's really positive. So that's all.
Great.
Thanks,
Kerry. So one thing we also wanted to discuss with you all today really is about how we can be as research ready as possible, and what does that actually mean? So in the UK, we're always still looking for people who are undiagnosed. I think Tim really went into lots of detail about, you know, the genomic programs that we've had over the past few years, which have really helped us identify more people who are diagnosed. But what's also helped is us having the clinics, the family support service that we've been able to develop, and developing the charity really. So within the UK, we have a really comprehensive database. So we know up to today, we have 95 people who are diagnosed, which is, you know, fantastic to have that comprehensive database. And as I say, we're still always, you know, looking for undiagnosed people as well. But around the world, we also know, as we've discussed today, that those numbers are patchy, you know, because, you know, the clinics and the research, and, you know, we help to try and other associations to develop, but the numbers are just really patchy. And when we're working with researchers, they really want to know where those numbers are. And it's great that in the UK we can say how many we have, but what we would love to be able to do is to know where the numbers are definitively across the world. How amazing would that be to be able to go to researchers with? And also on a weekly basis, we get people contacting us time and time again to say, we've just had a diagnosis of Alström syndrome in our country. Do you know if there's any more people here? And sometimes we do, and sometimes we're able to connect people, but more times than not, we kind of have to do a bit of digging, and we think, oh, we think we know there's a few more people in your country, but we're not sure. And wouldn't it be great to be able to connect communities together and to develop that more? So what we've developed is a really quick and easy form to complete. It's more like a contact form, so it takes less than 5 minutes to complete. And what we want to do is to be able to fill that with people who are diagnosed globally. So you don't need to complete it if you live in the UK, because as I say, we've got a really comprehensive database. But if you live outside of the UK, what we want to do is for people to complete their contact form. So if you do have a firm diagnosis of Alström syndrome, you can pop onto a secure system. It's a Google form, and on there you can pop in your contact details, and then when we have researchers who hopefully will be in touch to maybe progress work further, we can then be in touch to find more information out about you. It's a real secure system. We're used to working with lots of people on our database, so the system is very secure. If you find it easier, you can also send your details across to me at catherine.lewis@alström.org.uk, and I can pop you onto the system manually. Now, there's also some places around the world where I know Google Forms don't work. So I've also been able to do some on a Word form for people, and they've been able to share them within their communities. Or at the minute, what I'm doing is I'm translating it onto a form into different languages and sending those out to different communities who are interested. So please do get in touch if the form at the moment isn't accessible for you, or if you need it in another language. There's the QR code which is on the screen at the moment. There's also the link, but as I say, I can pop those details across to you. You can get in touch with me via email, and it's just a really good way, a really quick and simple way of us being able to gather that global information, so we can really try to understand some of the information and about whereabouts you all are in the world. And at the moment, we've only been literally a few weeks since we've started the global database. But since then, we've had 35 people complete their information, which has taken over 20 countries. So at the minute, so the dots that are on, I've got a map up at the minute with lots of little markers. Now, the markers are not anything specific, so please don't think that it's a specific point in the map. It isn't. It just gives an indication of whereabouts they are in the world, and we have a few people in different areas, so one marker doesn't exactly mean it's just one person, but it's just to give an idea that we've had lots of people completing it, and at the minute it's across 20 countries. So actually, if you think if we get more and more people completing it, you know, how many people are we going to be able to connect across the world, which would be absolutely fantastic. Now we're going to open it up now to a bit of a question time. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment, just to see if anyone's got any questions about anything we've discussed up to now, anything they'd like to ask Tim, anything they'd like to ask Bernd, or myself or Kerry, or if there's anything specific about Alström Syndrome UK or more of the global work, anything that you would like to ask us, then please do pop it in the chat. I don't know if anything has come through while I've been chatting away. Kerry, has anything come through on the chat?
Tim, there's a link to a paper in the chat. I don't know if you can see that, but it's looking at work on Amlexanox, therapeutic for atopic metabolic and inflammatory disease.
Oh, I'll have to look that up. I'm
Yeah,
just trying to spot the link. I can't see the link. I've got links. Oh yeah, I found it. I've seen it. Yeah, Amlexanox. No, for the atopic metabolic. Well, so inflammation forms a part of lots of rare diseases, and it's definitely a part of Alström as well. So in theory, an anti-inflammation medicine might be relevant. Possibly metabolic. It's not one I know, but I will follow the link and I will have a read of the paper, and I'll get back to Catherine with an answer once I've had a chance to have a read of it, if that's helpful, and then you can pass it on.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that'd be great.
There's another part to that one as well, Tim. So I'd also like to know what you think about new reviews of the special diet, total free of refined carbohydrates, and the combination of intermittent fasting, natural complements like Scuturalira. I've not heard of that one.
So I think you have to be careful about whether we're talking about adults who are fully grown or children who have different nutritional requirements because they're still growing at that point. So anything that's got low in carbohydrate is quite popular in adults at the moment, and in people with diabetes at the moment. But for children, remember that carbohydrates are needed to give you energy, and you need that to help grow as well. So I think one just has to be careful, and if you've got the condition and want to go on that diet, please do discuss it with your main doctor first, just to check that there's no reason why you shouldn't be on it. That would be my best advice.
Thank you. And then comment from Marina Catherine, where she mentions the liquid retina. And thank you, Marina, for sharing those details after we met recently. I did share them with the people that are running the sensory loss workshop, so we're hoping to get that included in that as well. So we will definitely feedback on anything it was the first time I'd heard of liquid retina. So yeah, it's good to hear that there's all these different techniques and things. And so yeah, definitely keep an eye on that one.
Great, thank you. So we will get back to you on any questions which we haven't had time for or that are a little bit complex. Now we've got a conference coming up which is in 2026, and it's Alström Syndrome International. So they're doing a family conference and scientific symposium which is going to be in Texas next year, and they are going to be doing some more links to the event and agendas and everything else, and more information will be coming out at the end of this month. So keep an eye on that, and it's from the 22nd to the 25th of May 2026, and it will be a great chance for families and professionals to all get together and enjoy some family time and some family fun over in America. So we will keep you up to date on our social media channels as well, with any links and more information about the event as we hear more about that one. So that one will be good to keep an eye out for. And we have lots of information available on our website as well, as Kerry mentioned earlier. So we have our medical handbook. It is being updated at the minute, so please bear that in mind, but it's a great look at understanding the rare condition. It really takes you through all the different symptoms, and it's a good one to sort of have a look through, and as along with the clinical guidelines, it's a really good introduction to the condition, particularly around consultants or professionals who may not be aware of the condition. Also, our latest news on the website is a really good place to start, particularly if you're new to the condition or you're wanting updates on ASUK and what's going on, particularly around research at the minute. There's lots of updates on our news channel and also on the research papers on our website. So there's lots of information on the website there for you to all have a look at. And also, we love raising awareness and connecting together. So we've recently have published a TikTok channel. So for a long time, it's very much been around Facebook and Twitter, or X as it's now known. And that's been really our main communication tools with the world. And we're still going to do that, definitely. But what we've been finding recently is lots of meetings we've had, lots of people are talking about TikTok, particularly around lots of people now going to TikTok as their trusted place to get health information. So we really felt that we had to jump on board really and see the communities that were there and what information we could get out there. So we've only literally just started over the last week or so. So please pop along, follow us, like us, and we will see what videos. It's a bit of a testing time at the minute on TikTok. So it's a bit of a learning curve. So have a look, and please do follow us.
And just to add to that though, just to please be careful everyone though with information on TikTok, because obviously often it's not evidence based, and we really ummed and ahed about whether TikTok were the right place, but we want to go where people are. So we wanted to get involved and share our information, but we're really aware that there's some information on TikTok that just be careful is my advice.
Definitely. I think that's a very good disclaimer actually to put out there. I think TikTok's a wonderful place, as you say, for communities, and we're finding that we've got to go where everybody is, so we've got to have our information out there, but also there's a lot of fake stuff on there. So it's really going to the organizations that you trust and the organizations that are trusted organizations to be able to get your information from. So the recording of today's webinar and the summaries, top tips and everything else that we normally do will all be posted on our website. We will circulate them to yourselves on email, and also it'll be on our social media channels. So we'll pop all the links on there when it's all ready, which will probably be over the next few weeks. And also, as I say, it will be in English, but we're hoping it'll be transcribed for you so that you'll be able to access them in different languages as well. And the last bit really is just to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for coming tonight and for giving up some of your time to come along and listen to the research updates. I hope you found it interesting. It's been a wonderful reflection, time to reflect really on, you know, where we've come to where we are now. And I think it also is a really great time to reflect on, as I say, where we've come, but also the hope for the future, which I think is fantastic. There is so many developments and research going on at the moment, not just in the UK, but across Europe and around the world, really. So I think the main thing is that we all really collaborate together. We're so much stronger together. And if you do want to get in touch, please do. Kerry's popped our email addresses in the chat. Mine's catherine.lewis@alström.org.uk, and our website is www.alström.org.uk. So thank you all for coming. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you ever so much,
everyone.
Tim.
Thanks,
And
Tim.
thank you, Bernd.
Bye-bye.
It's been
Bye-bye.
fantastic
Have a
to
nice
hear
evening.
from you
Thanks.
both. Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank you.